Thank you very much for that very good introduction to our session this morning. I'd now like to call to the podium a good friend of mine, Jose, from the UNECE, who will give us an overview of general policy for development business angels. I often think of him in his United Nations capacity when I'm dealing with my entrepreneurs that I've invested in, but more in the peacekeeping and dispute resolution expertise the United Nations has, which sometimes be useful in my negotiations.
Thank you very much, Nelson, for that nice introduction, and good morning to everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here again in Astana, and I would like first to thank the organizers for giving the opportunity to participate in this prestigious forum and share with you some of the work on a comparative review of policy experiences on early stage financing that we have conducted at the Economic Commission for Europe. So, why do we need a policy? There is a policy problem? Well, innovative SMEs face particular challenges when trying to raise finance because they are a high-risk proposal, they have no collateral, and therefore conventional financial intermediaries are reluctant to provide financing to them. So a financing gap emerges, but at the same time we know that SMEs are critical for economic dynamism, are a source of radical disruptive innovation, and therefore should be promoted. So a policy need to address those challenges emerge. What's the target of these policies? The target is not, and it's important, to provide more public resources to them. The target is to increase the availability of private sector financing. And this is done through the encouragement to the development of specialized financial intermediaries, the venture capital industry, and also business angels, and through extensive programs of public support in different areas. There is an awareness that there is a need to increase, to address this financing line challenge for the effective commercialization of ideas. The focus of intervention in Europe has changed. Obviously, there are variations across countries, but from an initial concern on alleviating the problems of innovative SMEs when trying to raise loans, the focus has shifted to development of the formal venture capital industry, so those companies that raise money from other companies and invest in innovative companies, and more recently a focus on developing and making use of the power of business angels. This shift, as I say, has changed across countries and depends on national circumstances, but it can be observed as a general trend. Why do we need government intervention? Again, why there is a policy issue? Well, because venture capital per se is quite reluctant to engage into early stage financing. And why? Because the risks are still very high, and the amount of money that a venture capital firm would like to commit is relatively large, and it's not suitable for very small companies at an early stage of development. So we have a policy problem. How policy goes about to address this issue? Well, we have different forms of intervention. A direct form of intervention is when public resources are invested directly in innovative companies, in companies that public servants believe have promises. There are some experiences on that, and they may have some value in kick-starting the industry, but they have a serious problem. Because do the civil servants have the right knowledge to make these investments? Venture capital is a highly skilled activity that requires a very significant expertise. And moreover, do civil servants have the right type of incentives to engage into this sort of activity? But probably not. They have some fixed salary. This is not the sort of business in which they are naturally proficient. So, given these constraints, the most popular form of intervention are indirect, where what they try to achieve is to harness private sector expertise in making investment decisions and investing together, providing the funds, so to leverage that private sector expertise. And we have a range of so-called hybrid funds which bring together public and private resources in a public-private partnership, and which are the dominant form of intervention. We have two main types of funds which differ on how the risks and rewards of this investment activity are shared between the two partners, the private and the public sector. On a pari passu case, then there is an equal sharing of risk and rewards, but even in that case, there is a beneficial effect of public sector participation for the private sector, because the public sector involvement may have some certification effects, may help out with due diligence, with the fees involved in setting up the fund, and so on. But much more popular are those funds which are structured in a way in which the sharing of the returns between the public and the private sector are unequal. So the private sector enjoys more of the returns of this investment activity when it's successful, in order that the encouragement effect is still stronger. And there are many varieties of these funds, no? With an equal sharing of returns. Maybe the private investor has the possibility to buy out the public investor when there is a successful investment. Maybe the timing of the distribution of the returns is also biased towards the private investor. Maybe there are some fees that are taken on board by the public sector, and so on. But the key question in structuring these funds is to preserve the right structure of incentives, so that we select the right type of managers, and that managers also face a risk. That's why funds in which an unconditional guarantee to the private investor is given are seen as not very successful. If you are a guarantee, then, well, anybody can do it, and you want to have the right type of managers. But moving towards business angels, early stage venture capital, even with public support, is not a solution to the problems that innovative companies face at the very early stage of their life. And we have seen that in many countries, no? And the reason for that is the one I mentioned at the beginning. Venture capital companies like to make relatively big investments, and they don't like risk. As a friend of mine used to say, the problem with risk capital is that they don't like risk and they bring too much capital. So we want to be able to nurture these small innovative companies so they grow into a size when other types of investors will be ready to be interested. And in many countries, business angel financing provides the bulk of early stage exit financing. And this is a situation that has increased with the recent crisis, which has heightened risk aversion. And one of the good characteristics of business angel financing is that, unlike other forms of financing that are present in this segment, they are less cyclical. Business angels have also another good characteristic, which, because they invest in a smaller, relatively small size in comparison to venture capital firms, they are present to explore many different ideas and to be present in sectors in which traditional venture capital will not be present. And innovation is, again, about exploration of ideas and seeing to what extent or whether they can succeed. In Europe, in particular, the interest in the business angel sector comes also from the realization that the continent is well behind the US in this area, where in other areas of financing the gap is not so large. In business angel financing, clearly Europe lags behind. So what sort of policy tools have been used to encourage business angel activity? Well, that depends on the country. The different situations in different countries allows to use some tools on others, so we do have some diversity of interventions. Tax incentives are quite popular and have been used in some countries, but we have also to sound a note of caution on tax incentives. It's important that the effect of these incentives is evaluated, so we have a clear understanding of whether they are successful in their current form or not. So just having tax incentives is not enough. We need to have the right type of incentives and know whether they work or not. Another very popular form of intervention is facilitating the creation of business angel networks. And this is a type of measure that has received extensive support in many European countries and also at the European Union level. A more recent but also very promising form of intervention is encouraging the cooperation of business angels among themselves but also with other types of investors. In some cases, including with the contribution of public funds to invest alone. So this is more limited, more recent, but also a very interesting measure. I would like to draw attention over three issues that have somehow increased the scope of policy in this area. I mean, business angel investment is, by its nature, mainly a local affair, as it was said earlier, because business angels like to keep an eye on their investments and those should be closed. But there are a number of transnational initiatives at the policy level that have taken place to encourage also cross-border investment. It's also very important, two other trends, which is syndication, when business angels pull together their investment power, and also co-investment, investment between business angels and other types of investors, because that allows business angels to increase the size of the deals and also to follow on their investments. As the company grows and the financing needs are bigger, they are able not to sell their equity, but to carry on and remain invested in the company. But for every equity investor, the way they make the money is by selling their stake. So exit routes are very important. So collaboration with other investors that gives an exit route, and also, more generally speaking, financial development that increases the possibilities to dispose of an equity stake, are also important factors in the development of this form of financing. In the Innovation Performance Review of Kazakhstan that was conducted by the UNEC and which was presented yesterday, we do have a recommendation on business angel financing that includes public support to the coordination of business angel activity, including through the support to business angel networks. And just to conclude, I would like to draw your attention on a number of conclusions which we have developed from this policy review of experiences in early stage financing in our countries, in countries that are members of the UNEC. As I say, not all countries are in a position to apply the same policy measures. That depends on the number of circumstances, the degree of development of financial markets, the institutional context, and so on. So it's important to pay attention to this national diversity before drawing on the good experiences of other countries. It's also important that interventions have a comprehensive character that address, on one hand, the supply of finance through the measures I discussed earlier, but also the demand of finance. So the companies who want to receive these funds. And for the demand of finance, we are looking at two different things. On the one hand, the general entrepreneurial climate that allows these companies to emerge, but also at a more specific level, the support given to these companies through various investment readiness programs that allow them to become more attractive in the eyes of investors, that teach them how to talk with investors. So comprehensiveness, addressing both supply and demand factors, is an important consideration in the successful intervention in this area. At the same time, countries have many programs, many different forms of intervention, and in our review of policy experiences in UNICE countries, we found out that coordination of these programs is not always present. That's an important consideration for success. So programs build on the success, on the achievements, on the outcomes of previous programs. The financing needs of companies change through their life cycle, and the success of different forms of intervention may have helped to overcome the problems in specific areas, segments of this life. It's important to carry out a mapping exercise to identify at which stage companies are facing a bottleneck and address the bottleneck through policy intervention. Again, not all the countries find themselves in the same position. The bottleneck may be different in different countries. Another important consideration is the need to strengthen the linkages between players in this area. That includes companies and investors, but also between different types of investors. And here the public sector can play a role through the coordination of these efforts. And finally, there is also a role for transnationalization through bringing together countries, and in that way overcoming the limitations of small domestic markets. That can be done through development of a hard infrastructure, so to speak, so creating the necessary legal and institutional changes, but also through the provision of a soft infrastructure, facilitating transnational communication, and therefore bringing together companies and investors from different countries. And finally, I would like to draw your attention to some of the publications that the Economic Commission for Europe has done in this area. These publications are available in English, in French, and in Russian, and can be downloaded from our website. We have also developed some training materials in the area of early stage financing, which can be used for self-study, but also to organize seminars and other capacity building events. Those training materials, again, are available both in English and in Russian, and I'll be very happy to share with you if you contact us. So those are my contact details, and I'll be happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.